Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, where our job is to help you build visibility, professional credibility, and connection with your ideal client by putting the human at the centre of innovative marketing, so you can build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship with your ideal clients. I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm honoured that you're here with me. If you haven't joined our wonderful marketing transformation community yet, go to innovabiz.co and collect your free gift as well. Do subscribe to the show and also leave a review because it helps others find us. Let's get into today's masterclass on this InnovaBuzz podcast.
I like to see sales as not me selling you a product and you using it. I like to see sales as an extension of partnerships and using the language around. So Jürgen, this conversation is really about whether or not we're a good fit to partner with each other. Because you coming on as a client for me, as an example, isn't just, I'm the boss and you're my client. This is actually a partnership. You're investing into my business. I'm reinvesting into your business for your business to succeed, and so on and so forth.
Welcome back. I hope you've had an awesome week so far. If you haven't yet listened to my recent conversations with empathy expert Dr. Mark Goulston and copywriter and content creator Christina Torres, then do check them out after you've listened to today's episode, of course. I'm really excited to have on the InnovaBuzz podcast as my guest today, Fabien Pataud, who helps coaches, consultants, and business leaders who aren't converting enough ideal clients to implement profitable sales and marketing systems which enables them to attract and convert 2 to 3 new opportunities every month. Fabien has developed the Sales Disruption 2.0 program to model his success in business and sales over the past decade. He now works with businesses and individuals globally to educate and inspire them into action. Fabien's passion is to turn you into a high-performing sales expert, revolutionising the way you approach life and business, achieving goals you never thought possible. In our discussion today, Fabien talked to me about seeing objections as reflections. What did you do to bring about the objection? We talked about viewing sales as a partnership activity with your clients, coming from a servant's heart. And we talked about how to amplify yourself and your creative genius, even in sales. Without further ado, then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Fabien Pataud. Hi, I'm your host Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today from Melbourne, Australia, Fabien Pataud, who's a sales coach and profit coach, and he helps high-ticket coaches and consultants and entrepreneurs implement profitable and scalable sales processes and sales teams. Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, Fabien. It's a real privilege to have you as my guest.
Hey, Jürgen, thank you so much. It's been a little while coming since we first connected to being able to finally have this session. So I'm really, really excited.
That's right. Well, we're in a great position at the moment on our podcast in that we've got so many people lined up for conversations, so many wonderful people like yourselves. But that means there is a time lag between when we first connect and when we get on. Yeah. So it was James Hayes who introduced us. He was on episode 264 of the InnovaBuzz podcast, and he suggested that we have a conversation with you on the podcast. So big hello to James.
Awesome. Thanks, James. Appreciate the connection.
Now, I'm really looking forward to learn more about your profitable sales system and your authority method and really digging into the whole sales process some more, because I think that's something that a lot of coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs really struggle with. So it's going to be a wonderful conversation today. Before we get into that, though, give us a whistle-stop tour of your background. I know, we had a chat pre-recording that you actually worked in a previous capacity quite near where I live. So give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So interesting journey, Jürgen. From about the age of 15, I had my heart set on becoming an electrician. I loved fixing things as a child, especially electrical components, whether it was VCRs and electro gadgets. And so I was going to drop out of school, and I rang an electrical mob for a role, and he said, "How old are you?" I said, "I'm 16." And he said, "Oh, you're quite young." He said, "Can you finish high school?" I said, "Yeah, I can." So I did. And he said, "I'll give you a job when you finish high school rather than now, just in case you don't like electrical, and you'll be kind of left in limbo with no education." And so long and short of it, I embarked down the path of becoming an electrician. Then I moved into project management. I moved into mining. And one day I woke up and realized that I wasn't, the fulfillment was no longer there, that journey had finished. That was about 7-8 years of that industry. And so I embarked on a travel for 6 months. And during that period of time, a friend of mine in real estate reached out to me and told me, I should consider getting into real estate. And so I came back to Australia, and real estate it was. And I did that for almost 5 years, and moved up the ranks into real estate, become the #1 sales agent, took our office to #1 most profitable office in Australasia. And I came across a fellow by the name of Kerwin Ray, a serial entrepreneur here in Australia, in Sydney. And I saw he was delivering to massive crowds of coaching and business and strategy. And I thought, geez, I think that's my next step. And so I had an opportunity to work with Kerwin. I headed his sales team after I left real estate. And after doing that for almost 6 months, I decided that it was time for me to put together all the lessons that I had occurred over time into my own methodology, into my own successes. And so I birthed Pataud Consulting, which is a profitable sales system company where we help people design sales processes, train and deploy high-performing sales teams. And so that's just over 2 years, 2.5 years now, and we've worked with some pretty amazing businesses along the way. And one of them one of our clients has been featured as one of the fastest growing companies in Australia, 2018 and 19. So we got them to #1 in their own sector, property, because of my background, and I think 57th overall in all industries in terms of growth and revenue growth in a single year. So we've although our business is quite young, the success has already made an impact. And so that's been my journey. I kind of think on my feet and I move, and when I sense a bigger and better direction, I'll actually work towards it. And I think that might tie into the podcast that you have, which is around innovation, and just I think one of the key attributes that is being able to apply yourself to something.
Yeah, well, that's a fascinating journey. I guess the step to real estate from the electrician was probably prompted by a friend, but going from the real estate industry then through sales. So I guess you honed your sales skills through the real estate industry. Is that what happened? And then you sort of moved on and thought, well, I could do that in another industry.
Yeah, correct. Well, the interesting thing was that I was told that I was crazy going into real estate, because I was on a pretty good packet in electrical and being in mining, and I went down, I think, almost 4 pay grades, so a fourth of my pay. So I went down to like $40,000 as a salary in real estate, and my hours are even longer, and I had to buy all the fancy suits and everything like that. And I was told I had the gift of the gab, so I'd be good at it. And it was a rude awakening for me. I had the door slammed on me constantly. I was abused, racial vilification as well. So it got pretty intense. You're knocking on people's doors, you're ringing people out of the blue. And so there's a lot of cold calling. And to be honest, in the first 3 months, Jürgen, and this is part of my story, and I teach this as I go into organizations, I spent half of the days sleeping in my car in a church, in a private car park of a local church in the areas in which I was farming in. And because I went out and, I'd knock on 10 or 15 doors and I'd have the door slammed on me, it was rejected fiercely. And I just didn't have the tools or the skills or the capabilities to actually work through that. So I would actually go and sleep in my car and come back to the office later that afternoon while the director would say, Fabien, how did you go today? Did you get any new leads? And I'd say, yes, I did. And, I'd make up some numbers and I was just, buying time, but I couldn't face the music. I announced it on the world on social media that I was moving into real estate. And, 3 or 4 weeks in, I'm like, this is the worst decision I made. And now how do I tell people that I wasn't good enough? And so I remember vividly, Jürgen, that I was about to call the director after waking up from a sleep. And I looked at my phone and I said, what the hell am I doing here? Like, this is not on. And so I went to call the director to say, I've quit, I'm not coming back. And I was not even going to go back into the office. I was going to go straight home and go get back into electrical. I just couldn't handle the I suppose the repercussions and how it made me felt. And I dialed the office number. I remember this vividly. I dialed the number. It was a unique number. And I was about to hit, call, and just this voice came over and it's like, mate, have you given this everything that you possibly can? Have you applied, everything that you possibly can? Are you giving up because you've done everything that you can and it's simply just not for you? Or are you giving up because this is just too hard and you haven't been applying yourself enough? And I'd realized that I was actually giving up well before I'd actually given it everything that I possibly could, like turned, every stone and researched and studied. And I came back into the office and I told the director that I was about to quit. And he said, well, I could see that the writing was on the wall. And he said, why didn't you? And I said, well, because I realized I haven't given it my all. And I said, Greg, and at this point, there was all these conferences happening. There was all these $1 million agents that I was seeing up on stage with winning these awards. And I just thought it was fake, Jürgen. I actually didn't, because it was so hard. I'm like, as if these people could be writing these figures. And so I said to my director, I said, what do I need to do to get up on those stages? And he said, well, you need to stop kind of mucking around. You need to treat this career seriously. You need to live and breathe this stuff. You need to pick up as much books, do as many programs as you possibly can. And he gave me one program in particular, and he said, start here. And it was Brian Tracy's Psychology of Achievement program. It's quite an old program. It's a 6 CD set. I think there's a copy on YouTube. And I started listening to that, and it was just in my car, and it was called the University on Wheels. And that program, coupled with the guidance of my mentor, the director at the time, was the turning point. I was able to kind of start to see patterns of my childhood surface, understand the way in which the brain works, and create a new rhythm for how I wanted to show up. And literally, I think it was about 14 months in sales, the goal was for me to become a gold badge status, which is to sell a number of homes a year and write a certain income level. It was over $1 million I wrote. And I too was one of those guys, 14 or 15 months later, up at the front of an audience of 500, getting an award for what I did. And then it progressed into a sales manager and so on and so forth. So yeah, it was an interesting time. It was that fork in the road moment of realizing that to never kind of give up until you're extremely confident that you've actually given it all that you possibly can.
Yeah, fascinating. And what were some of the learnings that you had in those early days that set you on that path to achieving that gold star status?
I guess the more I spent working on myself, the more time that I spent working on myself, and the more time I spent in the office when everyone went home and researched areas, studied statistics, looked at human behavior, understood how people respond, understand how people think, understand how people made decisions. It was giving me more armory. Every time I had a conversation, my conversations were getting slightly longer. I was getting slightly more interest. I was getting more openness, and all of a sudden more doors were opening rather than closing. And so I'd realized that I did have what people used to say, which is the gift of the gab. I had the confidence and the ability to speak up. What I didn't have was ways in which I could structure my language in such a way that would actually have people, sign up with me or pay me money for me to help them. So I had the gift of the gab in terms of having people being able to like me, but there's a big difference in people liking you and then people hiring you. And so I didn't want to be the most well-liked agent who was the brokest. I wanted to be the most well-respected agent who was, in the top 10 in Australia.
Okay, and what about the mindset part of that? Because you talked earlier about, getting sort of so many rejections that you ended up sleeping in the car in a church in the middle of the day, presumably, and the rejection kind of really drained on you. How did you get to because I'm assuming you still got lots of rejection. How did you change the mindset and what those rejections meant?
It took a while, to be honest, to get over it. A lot of the times it's around anticipation. So because, one of our targets was having to speak to 103 people a day. That was one of the prerequisites when I was in real estate. It was 103 contacts a day. And so to get to that number, you would have to, knock on 200 or 300 doors in the day or more, and phone calls as well. And so a lot of the times it was anticipation of a form of rejection is going to come. There's a high probability it's a no. And so the question is whether there's any substance to the no, and how do we anticipate that? And so I would take the objections away from them. I learned very quickly to disrupt, which is one of my kind of pillars in what we teach, is to disrupt the thought process and the patterns in how people typically respond. And so an example of that would be when I used to knock on the door of somebody's house and I'm in a suit and I'm either got a clipboard or a bag or something which represents that I'm either a real estate agent or a Jehovah's Witness or an undercover police officer or something like that. But generally, I'm not somebody that people really want to speak to. And I would knock on the door and I would say something in reference to somebody else. So the conversation wouldn't necessarily be about the person in front, whereas before it would be like, "Hi, my name's Fabien from XYZ Real Estate. Are you thinking of selling, or what are you doing?" And it was always about them, which put their defenses up. And so I would knock on the door and say, "Hi, Jürgen, look, really sorry to bother you. I know that you're probably in the middle of something really important right now, but I'm really curious to know, you've probably been living here for a little while. I was speaking to a lady down the road and she mentioned that there's somebody in this street that's actually thinking of moving very soon. And I know it's probably not you, but I thought you might know who that person may be." And so in that frame, in that sentence, I say things like, I already take away the fact that they're probably, they're busy right now, that somebody else is thinking of selling, and I know it's not you, so it would diffuse the pressure off them, and we would move the conversation to somebody else. And of course, most of the times I'd say, "Oh, I don't really know," and I would question them through that process, and then I would come back to them. So it's all really about the different areas of the brain, Jürgen, which is the reptilian brain. The fight-flight response is the ability to kind of keep the roller shutter down so it doesn't come up. And once I understood the natural responses or the natural instincts that people had, I was able to kind of craft different strategies around that. And so a lot of it was trial and error. There's the interruption frame that we used to implement, which was, we would knock on the door and I would have my back to the person opening the door. And so I'd be admiring the front yard as an example, and they would say, "Hello, excuse me." And I would turn around. And so now the dynamic of the relationship has changed, whereas they're interrupting me, I'm not interrupting them. And so it changes the pattern and the behavior of the way the brain typically responds to certain scenarios. And so most of it, though, had been through, following experts, like the Brian Tracy's, like the Tom Hopkins, but adapting it to the new age. Because what I found was that a lot of their methodologies got you to a particular point, but I began to notice that the way in which people were responding, in particular with social media and the way the world was rapidly progressing, that a lot of that stuff wasn't as effective. And so I got it, I refined it, and I improved it, then I implemented it.
All right. Well, I think, the fear of rejection, in my view, is probably one of the biggest things why people don't do sales as well as perhaps they could. And I know I struggle with that still, even though I'm aware that the rejection doesn't mean anything about me.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, a lot of people do find that difficult, and also they kind of back off from serving their potential customer, which is what I think sales is.
Mm-hmm.
They back off from that and don't sell because of that fear of rejection, or they might find it icky. So, what are some of your tips for changing that mindset and overcoming that fear of rejection?
Yeah, great question. I think the context of being rejected is not about you. I don't think that that's entirely true, because a lot of the times it is about you. It's the way in which you deliver what it is. It's whether or not you connect with that person. And so I think it's a great train of thought to have the idea that it's never really about you. It's about what you're offering, or the client is not ready yet. It's a great frame of mind to have. But ultimately, I think that just the embracing the acceptance that it naturally has to occur, and that behaviorally, instinctively, human beings are prone to saying no because it's our natural way of defending ourselves, especially when you're meeting somebody new, or a new idea or a new concept is being introduced to you. And so going in with the mindset of that, I know that instinctively people need to say no to particular things, especially new things, and being okay with that first and foremost. That's the first place that I like to start. Beneath that, which we might not have too much time to get into, is that understanding what does actually rejection mean to you personally. Because if you can uncover what meaning you bring to being rejected, whether it's not worthy, or inadequate, which is ultimately the same thing. But if you can understand what meaning you're bringing to somebody saying no to you, and how that actually affects you emotionally, and why that affects you emotionally, that's when you can start to build a toolkit to help you overcome that, and walk through that.
Mm. I think that's where I was coming from, that, the rejection, you make the rejection mean something about yourself, that you're not worthy, you're not good enough, as opposed to saying what you suggested at the beginning, which is, yes, it's about me from the context of I haven't communicated this well enough to the other person.
Mm.
Because and if I'm convinced this is something that's going to help you, Fabian,
Mm-hmm.
but you've said no to me, so obviously I haven't communicated it well enough to convince you of my belief,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's on me to change.
Correct.
But so that's the one
Yeah.
side of it. The other side is, of course, I could go away and say, well, you don't like me, and that just proves my story that I'm not worthy or I'm not good enough or something like that. So that's where I was coming
Awesome.
from.
Yeah, it's great. There's a module that we teach, which is, objections are reflections, and objections are reflections of your internal dialogue. And so the reality is that whilst most of the clients that come to me want help with overcoming the price objection, or now's not the right time, or I need to speak with my partner, the objections that human beings first must overcome is the internal dialogue that's taking place beforehand. So we tend to beat ourselves up well before the events even happened. And so the interesting thing that I found is that, and I remember a conversation with a client about a year ago, where there was a situation where one of the salespeople were kind of sitting on the fence. Things were going on at home, and in that period of events taking place, there was high levels of uncertainty. And during that period, their sales results had slumped, whereby every conversation that didn't end up into a sale, guess what the last messages were? We're just unsure right now. We're sitting on the fence with this. We're not sure if we're going to proceed. And so the interesting thing that what we saw, and what I keep seeing with all the people that I coach, is that there's a direct correlation between the events and the circumstances that might be happening at home for them, or within their business and their life, where there's blockages, tends to surface in the way in which they communicate. So if there's lack of certainty, that tends to be transferred in a conversation. If there's high levels of certainty, that tends to be transferred in a conversation. And so if you're a person who constantly needs to speak to your partner before making decisions, because that's your decision-making process, then there's a high probability that that's the type of responses that you're actually going to get when you're actually communicating to people. It's very, very interesting. So we help our clients delve into that, and when we look at all their failed attempts, there's generally a correlation between certain events and circumstances, or the way in which they operate.
Yeah, I love that. I love objections are reflections. So you're basically getting back what you're putting out there, even though you may not be aware that that's what you're putting out there.
Yeah, and the benefit of this is, and here's how we take that to a point where, okay, now we've got this negative charge or this negative connotation. How do we flip it? Well, the beauty is that we need that feedback, because the benefit is all our failures and all our mistakes and all our challenges, in particular when we're talking sales related, gives us the clues to the next step. It actually showcases us the thing that we need to immediately work on. And so if we can actually look at that and go, hey, this is great because I'm getting instant feedback, and the fear or the doubt or the uncertainty that I'm getting right now is the clue to my next step, then that's the ticket. And so I show my clients that this is this is not a stumbling block, this is your building block. And when you step over it or above it, then you can see it in other people when it's their stepping block. And so it's really easy to coach somebody through that when it surfaces. But if you can't see it because you're mirroring it, then you can't get it. You can't get through.
Yeah. So how do you make that connection
with the mirroring component?
From what you observe. So let's say I'm talking to you about something I'd like to sell you because I think it could really help you, and you come back to me and say, oh, I'm not really sure. I'll have to think about it. Some response that says to me, there's uncertainty there. So clearly I'm putting out uncertainty. So how do I make that connection? How do I address that uncertainty in myself?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's in that moment clarifying where their uncertainty is coming from. And so really what it means is, if I say to you that I'm just not sure right now, and say, well, okay, that's quite interesting, Jürgen. Pardon me. What that tells me is I probably haven't done my job effectively on this call, which is to make it really simple for you to decide either way whether what it is that I have to offer is actually going to benefit you or not. So can I just check in with you for a moment? Based on what we've discussed so far and what I've told you about what we offer, can you see more benefits than no more benefits? Can you see that? And so what that will do then is get them to, it's a form of isolating an objection, although it's getting into a little bit more depth of what they're seeing and what they're hearing versus what we're putting out. And if they say, well, no, not really. Okay, great. Perfect. So help me clarify, what have we potentially missed here? What hasn't made sense so far? What hasn't landed for you? And then we can go into that component, because the challenge is that as humans, there are kind of 4 areas whereby communication takes place and where it typically breaks down. So there's our own internal thought process. So what we're thinking, and generally what we're thinking to what we're speaking and communicating is very different.
Yeah.
And then there's the prospect, the other person who is receiving the information, who is digesting it or not digesting it, to then them communicating back. And so there's kind of 4 areas there where we have a breakdown. And a lot of the times when I coach a client, they'll say to me, but Fabien, I said that. And I say, okay, let's hear the recording. I mean, how did you say it? I said, da, 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 da. And I haven't said the full thing that was meant to have been said. I say, well, no, you didn't actually say it. And here's how you said it. And can you see how that would have been represented by them? And so a lot of the times what we think and what we say are very different. And I help people actually ensure that what they're thinking and what they're saying is actually matching. Sorry about that. There's my little fella's
right.
running through the top.
Yeah,
Did you want
that's
the
the
isolation officers?
yeah, that's right.
I can hear my wife.
The new normal for the podcast. I
It
did
is.
a recording earlier this week, and we had the same thing.
And I could hear my wife's footsteps chasing in. Yeah, so it's really about identifying, your thought to what you're saying and whether there's actually synergy there and how it's being interpreted. And so that's kind of the thesis as to how we get people to understand what's actually going on for them. But the clarification component is actually key. And as a salesperson, it's taking responsibility. If you notice how I said that to you, Jürgen, I didn't want to put the pressure on you, which is an old tactic of, okay, so what is there to think about, Jürgen?
Yeah.
That's really applying pressure now on the prospect, which, and cornering them. And no one likes to be cornered. It's me taking ownership because my role as the expert is to ensure that you're getting a clear picture and I'm making the decision really easy for you, whether it's a yes or a no. If there's ambiguity and there's uncertainty, then I haven't done my job effectively. We're looking for a clear no or a clear yes. And so that way it's like, Jürgen, I think I haven't done my job correctly on this call so far. I haven't obviously made this really easy for you to decide. Please help me to understand, where am I missing the mark here in explaining to you the benefits here, or can you see this? And they'll share.
Yeah, so listening is really important, and active listening and reflecting back. And it really is like a conversation, isn't it? So it's a sales conversation that is a conversation where you spend a lot of time listening and reflecting back.
Correct. Yeah.
So one of the things I find challenging, and I suspect I'm not alone in this, is you have a conversation like that. How do you kind of close it off? How do you get to the point, what kind of checks do you have to say, all right, are you ready now to make the decision? And then if they say yes, well, or I have to go, or, the conversation's over, how do you close? How do you do the close as to use kind of sales jargon? And I know that's probably not real good language, but.
Sure. Yeah, good question. I think for the way we teach anyway, there's a lot of modalities, there's a lot of different methodologies when it comes to sales, and I'm always adding and refining what we teach here. The big thing that I've been running with for quite some time is that opening is the new closing. And I'm a huge believer in setting up the foundation of the call at the very beginning, setting up the expectations of the call at the very beginning, in particular, what the next steps are most likely going to be, so that there's a clear communication, there's clear understanding, and there's no surprises. So what I like to do is remove any awkwardness at the very beginning that could surface at the very end, which is, so what do you think, Jürgen? Like, are we going to do this? And, do I Visa or MasterCard, and all those things where people can get a little bit awkward. And so there's two ways to kind of do it. One way is to break up your sales process and to have what we call an inception call, which is a pre-qualification conversation. And this is to check in with that prospect around, where they're at right now, what their business looks like, what are some of their challenges, where do they want to go, what's getting in the way, and are they in a position to be able to invest? Who else is involved in making decisions in the business? So it's a pre-qualification conversation that sets up a strategy session or a discovery call, or whatever you call, game plan session, whatever the name is for your 45-minute or 1-hour consult or 2-hour consult, however long the sales process is. It's extracting that information at the very beginning to set the seed to help them create some structure and help you create some structure in your secondary call. So having that initially done is a key component to being able to close more effectively. And then at the start of every strategy session is to set the expectations, as I said before. And so each business that we work with, or every business, should have some quadrants or their own internal checklist of some key requirements that they need to ensure that this person meets before they even invite them to work with them to form a partnership. And I like to see sales as not me selling you a product and you using it. I like to see sales as an extension of partnerships and using the language around. So Jürgen, this conversation is really about whether or not we're a good fit to partner with each other. Because you coming on as a client for me, as an example, isn't just, I'm the boss and you're my client. This is actually a partnership. You're investing into my business. I'm reinvesting into your business for your business to succeed, and so on and so forth. And I think coming in with a partnership mentality kind of levels the playing field. And so there's a few quadrants that we teach. There is the situational quadrant. So, Jürgen, today's conversation is really about understanding, where your business is at, where you'd like to go, what are some of the things getting in the way, what's worked well for you, what hasn't worked well for you. And then if I feel as though that we can actually support you in some of your goals and help you overcome the obstacles, at some point during this conversation, I'm going to invite you to come on as a partner with us. Okay. And at that point, I'm happy to explain to you exactly what that partnership looks like, the duration, what you'll get, how much it costs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if at any point I feel as though that I can't help you, then I'll also stop the conversation short and point you hopefully in the right direction. Is that okay with you? The prospect says, yes, great. Okay, so it's very clear now what's being set up for. And to say from my perspective, for me to determine whether or not we're going to be the right partners, there's kind of 4 key areas that I need to look at. So I need to look at your situation to make sure it is a situation that I can improve and I can help you overcome. I need to look at, financially, whether your business is in a financial position, whether you have the ability to invest in the growth of your business, and what needs to happen financially for your business to keep moving along, for the dials to keep turning. Emotionally, I need to understand where you're at emotionally too, Jürgen, to make sure that right now, emotionally, things are quite stable for you, things not just in your business, but outside of business, where your business also impacts. There's some stability there that I need to understand as well. And then culturally, I think the best partnerships, like any marriage, there needs to be a cultural alignment in how we operate. And so they're kind of the 4 key areas that I'm going to be looking at in this conversation. Out of curiosity, what are some of the key important things for you when you go to decide on a partnership with somebody? And then I hear what they have to say.
Yeah.
And they'll say things like trust and integrity, and they'll repeat some of the things that I say as well, credibility and, things like that. And so I think, the closing component is that now that it's been set up, as you heard, I've said that there's going to be an invitation and we're going to chat about that. And then there's obviously some key milestones within the sales process that we teach that ensures that when you get to the offer component, first step, there is an invitation. So I've heard your situation. I say to you, Jürgen, I've done a lot of the asking in the last 20, 30 minutes. How about you ask me some questions? What's going on for you right now? Where would you like to take this conversation now? And they'll say something like, well, where to from here? Where do we go next? So, well, I think so far you're a fit for what it is that we have to offer. Would you like me to start explaining what that looks like now?
So you're asking for permission at every step, really?
Correct. Yep. Inviting them all the way.
All right. Well, that's really fascinating. Now, what do you say to people? I know you've had conversations like this with other podcasters that, let's say I give you a call out of the blue and I say, Fabien, you're an expert on sales. I'm really struggling with sales. So can I get together with you for half an hour for a coffee and, just pick your brain? So how do you deal with those kind of queries? Yeah. Or let's say I meet you at a networking event, because that's where those kind of questions usually pop up.
Sure. Well, I think the interesting thing, you might laugh at this, Jürgen, too, is that it's still happening at the moment, but those coffee catch-ups are being masked by podcasts.
As I was asking that question, I was thinking to myself, well, there's a sneaky way to do that. You just get them on the podcast.
Exactly. That's what I thought. I've gone back to all the interviews that I've been on. I'm like, geez, I've given away a lot of ammunition on these podcasts. Look, I think, and that happens a lot, depending on who the person is and what the conversation is about. We use a framework for referral partnerships. So it's kind of like the inception call that I was talking to you about before, that pre-qualification call. First thing is always to acknowledge somebody when they reach out, because I think that's really important. I've tamed the ego over time. It's like, Jürgen, hey, thank you so much for reaching out and for wanting to catch up. That sounds amazing. Let me get a little bit more context, if that's okay, from you, to find out, what is it specifically that you're looking for, and how maybe we might be able to best help each other. Is that okay if we have a quick conversation before we catch up, just to make sure it's actually going to be valuable for both of us? And so, it's a value conversation. I'm making sure it's clear that it's for both of us. And my train of thought then is to say, well, who are you serving? Who's your market? And if I do add value, is there anything in return that I could potentially receive as well that's going to make it worth my time? Well, secondly, if you do need some serious help, it's like, okay, well, I could meet you for 30 minutes and tweak your sales process, but ultimately, is that helping or hindering you? And so, my train of thought would be then say, Jürgen, I could spend 30 minutes with you and we could work on a couple of things, but imagine spending 6 weeks with me and what impact that would actually have on your business. I'm not trying to sell you anything, but if I can show you how we can help you do X, Y, Z in a period of time, would that be more valuable than kind of driving out to the city and spending those few hours versus being able to immerse yourself in some of the learnings that we have? So it just depends on the angle that I might take.
Yeah, it's great. So again, you're having that kind of partnership conversation, even though it might end up being, well, maybe we don't have coffee, maybe we don't have a conversation.
Yeah, send some resources as well. If you're super busy and you don't think it's going to be highly valuable and you want to guard your time and protect your time, then I would send them some resources. I just did that a couple of weeks ago. A whole stack of people commented. I filmed a quick Loom video. I thought, rather than speaking to these people individually, I filmed a Loom video, went through a quick framework, and I just sent it off to them. It was a 10-minute training. And from that, I got an amazing response, and some opportunities came from it. So,
yeah, well, that's a great little tip. I mean, videos. I've got videos on my bullet list here to talk about, but I'm looking at the time now, and I think we might have to leave that one for today. But I think there's a great tip there to record videos at just 10 minutes, and particularly if people are asking lots of the same questions, and then share that tip or share that little lesson and send them there.
One of my mentors says that you got to teach, show them the know-how without the know-how. And so, show that you can help solve a problem, but then also stretch the gap when you're solving a particular problem that gets people to want to actually come and work with you.
Yeah, well, of course, you can give people tips, but given that you've spent thousands of hours learning what that's, a 10-minute video tip is not going to replace that, is it?
Correct.
All right, well, this has been fabulous, Fabien. Now, I'm aware of the time, and I think it's a good point to move on to the Buzz, which is our innovation round designed to help our audience who are primarily innovators and leaders in their field with some tips from your experience. So I've got 5 questions, and hopefully you'll give us some really insightful answers and inspire the listener to go and do something awesome as a result today.
Sure, let's do it.
What's the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Sure. I think implementation is key. So, having an idea is great, and we all have them, but implementing is literally where things come to life. And I think having a mindset of, you've got an idea, put it on a board, implement, see how far you can take it, but also see who you need next to you to make sure that idea can come to life. I think I've seen too many people, including myself, try to come up with the idea and be the implementer and executor and all things to that idea. Very quickly, it's like identifying your place in innovation. It's like, am I the idea person? Am I the integrator? Am I the implementer? Am I the executor? Am I the leader? Knowing your role and knowing who you need around you to get that piece of innovation or that idea off the ground. And so being able to rally troops is really critical to innovating, I believe.
I love that. The implementing is key. Reminds me. I mean, there's so many times where I see something and I think I thought of that ages ago, but of course somebody else implemented it. I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So that's certainly the one. And then falling into the risk of I think I've had a great idea. I think I'll see what I can do with this, and not asking for help and not getting people on board.
Because of the fear of the idea getting taken as well, and there's
Yeah, sometimes it's that, but sometimes it's just this natural tendency to want to do everything yourself.
yeah, of course, yeah,
Mm.
I understand
Which
that.
is an ego thing, probably.
Yeah.
All right, what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
What's the best thing that I've done to develop new ideas? In human design, for anyone that's familiar with it, I'm a manifesting generator. And if you've never looked up your human design charts, really fascinating tool. Just Google human design and you can do a little test and it'll show you how you show up in particular ways, how you're wired. Manifesting generator. So the things that I do typically is I put ideas well before they're even fully constructed out there into the marketplace. So I'll have a concept, a hack, and I'll throw it out to the audience to see what kind of responses I'll get. Then I refine as I go. So I might throw 4 or 5 or 6 ideas, a cluster of ideas out in a couple week period, and see what gets the most momentum or traction. And then from that, I go back and I spend more time honing in on that concept. And so I guess it's kind of like fast market feedback, if you will. So the benefit is I get to find the thing that people are most interested in sooner. The con of that is that it can make me look as though that I'm quite scattered because there's so many things coming out at any given time. And so just being mindful of that is really important. So I try to stick with things that are still in line with my industries.
Being in alignment, yeah, and finding the balance there. I think it's kind of like the lean startup methodology, isn't it? You kind of get something out early before you spend a lot of time refining it in order to get feedback to see what people are actually interested in.
Well, it's exactly how I built my first program to the client who became number one fastest growing company in Australia. I sold them an 8-week training program that I hadn't built yet. It was my first 2 months of business. And I reverse engineered their problems and told them this is how long I think it would take to solve it. And then I built the program as I delivered. And yeah, that's just kind of how I've always operated.
Yeah. All right. Do you have a favorite resource you use most often?
Favorite resource? For me, it's voice memos and whiteboards. So you can't see behind me, but I've got 2 whiteboards up on the wall, and I've got two in the kitchen, and then one movable one. So I've got about 5 or 6 whiteboards. And so for me, I'm a very visual person. I need notes and writing in front of me. And my most lethal asset is voice. And so I spent too much time trying to type things, but voice into transcribed or into my VAs to get something done is just the speed track. So idea into message, into written, into an ebook, and yeah, that's just been a game changer for me personally.
Yeah, I'm finding that as a really valuable tool now. That I'm starting to use a lot more. I've got a new transcription tool that actually works reasonably well as an AI tool. It's about 97% accurate, and the tidy up is quite easy. And the benefit of it, well, there's two real benefits I'm seeing right now. First of all, if I explain something and I kind of imagine having a conversation like this, then it's my voice. So when I write something down, I tend to get much more formal. So that voice transcription is the way I speak. So when people know me and they read that, it's like I'm talking to them. And the second thing I've just come to realize is that I've got so much content that I've done on video or podcasts or webinars that I can now repurpose into written content. very easily, which
Yeah,
I'm working my way through now. So yeah, the voice memo is just fantastic.
it is. It is. You're right about the typing. Sometimes when I type it and I read it back, I'm like, geez, this doesn't even sound doesn't sound right. Even my wife laughs. She's like, you didn't say that word.
Yeah. All right. Now, what's the best way to keep a client on track?
Best way to keep a client on track, accountability and consistent check-ins. I think, we just had a workshop before, as I mentioned to you before we jumped on this call. We had a virtual workshop and it was called the 6-week cycle. So generally speaking, we catch up as a group every 90 to 120 days. And, we've tend to, a lot of business planning now is in 90-day cycles. And, what we found though is that 90 days can be quite long, especially for entrepreneurs. And so I think having a more regular check-in, so a meeting, a rhythm cycle that's more frequent. And if you're doing group coaching or you've got a pod of clients, having a team of accountability buddies, so buddying people up with check-ins. And what I found to be really beneficial for us is your Monday post-it notes. So every client of ours every Monday takes a photo of a post-it note, and on that post-it note has either 3 to 5 major tasks that they're going to accomplish this week that they need to do. And then on the Friday, they're checking in with completion of those tasks. So photo, send it through, and whoever doesn't send it through gets a message. It's like, John, we're waiting for your post-it note.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's what we've found to be quite beneficial.
Mm-hmm. The public accountability is a strong motivator, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think momentum, it's sometimes easy in the first few sessions to overwhelm your prospect or your client because you want to over deliver. But what I found is doing the reverse, having some real small milestones at the very beginning to give them some momentum, some encouragement, and then you can start to ramp up the workload once they've gotten into a good groove of working with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So quick wins, quick transformations, and then sort of, yeah, that's kind of the adult learning model in a way, isn't it? You have a few quick wins and then you build that into the unconscious and then you layer on top of that.
Yeah, or the opposite, which is an old mentor of mine used to say when I got a bit carried away in my real estate days. He said, Fabien, don't let a pat on the back turn into a massage.
I love that. Yeah. All right. Now, what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Is to amplify themselves. I think that too many people are mimicking. And, another mentor said to me, Fabien, life's about copy and paste. And so, don't try and reinvent the wheel. And I agree with that. And I think when it comes to systems and fast tracking things, that's where that analogy can apply really well. But I think where a lot of people get caught, and what I've been caught is I've tried to replicate somebody else, and they are who they are. And so we're already all different, even though we're very similar. And I think it's just being able to go deep into your own genius and just amplifying that. Like we all have a lane, and when you can find that creative genius in that particular lane, in that area of the business, in how you show up, and you just quadruple down on that component of you, then you'll stand out. If you're doing live videos, just be you. Don't try and deliver in a different way, like what we just discussed before. If you're dictaphoning, like you just speak you, because it'll attract the people that are naturally attracted to you as you show up, and it will repel those that aren't in synergy. And for everyone, that's a benefit because it means that you don't have to try to wear 2-3 different masks each day. You're just you, and so you come home and you don't have to take anything off, and you don't have that conflict of taking on clients who saw a version of you. Now they see the real you, or vice versa, and then there's conflict in the relationship. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just amplify you.
Yeah. That's great advice. And, you talked about, I mean, I say it's really tiring to try and pretend to be somebody else or try and keep up something when, it's one thing to model off successful people, but to try and mimic them and, like you say, put on that mask is quite a strain.
It's hard though, Jürgen, because we've done it since childhood.
Yeah,
Because
we have. Yeah.
the problem was that when we were ourselves, we were kind of, we were told no and stop, and
Yeah.
we've made mistakes. So then we started to alter our behavior to fit, to be accepted by our parents or our guardians. And the challenge is that, I call it the greenhouse effect. And now we're in our 20s and 30s and 40s, and yet we're still trapped in that behavior that we decided to adapt at that point to try to fit in.
Yep, that's the problem. All right. Well, this has been fabulous, Fabien. Now, where can people find out more about what you do and your training courses, and perhaps even get in touch and say thank you for what you've shared today?
Sure. So website is a great place to start. It's www.pataud consulting, so PATAUD consulting.com. On there, there's some resources, some case studies. You can also reach out on Facebook. I'm pretty active on Facebook and LinkedIn. Not as much on LinkedIn. Facebook seems to be my main audience, but I do have a bit of a following on LinkedIn. So yeah, Fabien Pataud. You can find me there. And you can shoot through an email if you want to get straight into contact, email or a messenger through LinkedIn and Facebook. So the email is info@Pataud Consulting, so PATAUD consulting.com, and happy to answer any queries. We've got a couple programs. We've got obviously the Profitable Sales System. It's a 90-day transformational program for coaches and consultants who want to get clarity in their mind. They want to build strong connection with their audience, and they want to obviously convert the types of clients that they want to work with. And so it's a program where a few students have generated over 6 figures in the 90-day program by implementing the strategies and the techniques that we teach. It's a really game-changing program. So it's in essence the program that we've used in the corporate space, and we've just made it as a fast-track version for coaches and consultants who are around that 6-figure mark, doing about 10K a month. They want to get to 20K, 30K. This program helps them do that quite rapidly and still being their authentic selves. So yeah,
Which is what we talked about earlier.
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Fabien. I'll post all the links in the show notes so people can click straight through.
Perfect.
Now, is there some parting advice you'd like to leave our listener with today?
I think that regardless of where you're at right now in your business, your career, your circumstances, I think that you're exactly where you need to be. And the moment we can all accept that where we are right now in this moment is where we ought to be, and ask ourselves, why are we here, and what is this showing me for my next move? Then you'll find the journey becomes a lot easier. What I found is that when we can't accept our situation and where we're at, our limitations, our whole situation, then it makes it really hard to forge through the next steps. And that yeah, anything's simply possible. Like anything that you actually want to apply yourself to is certainly achievable. And so long as you your own voice of reason and your own voice of belief overpowers the other voices, then you'll succeed in what it is that you're trying to achieve if you truly deeply want it. And if you don't get it, it's probably because you truly deeply didn't really want it. And the thing that you really want will come.
Yeah, and I love that. And particularly, a lot of people kind of beat themselves up for where they are right now and say, like, this is not really where I want to be. And so instead of accepting that now is the time that's where they are and it's the right place to be, and looking forward, they kind of beat themselves up. And so then the path forward isn't as clear.
Yep. It's that analogy I used before. The stumbling block is your building block. So you've just got to flip it on its side so that you can step on the top of it.
Great. All right. Finally, who would you like me to chat with on a future InnovaBuzz podcast, and why?
Great question. There is a gentleman, a good friend of mine, Johan Negera. He's pretty large in the tech space. Has built a few decent-sized companies and taken one company here to 20 million in Australia in 4 years. I think he would be an awesome person for your show and for your listeners. He's all about innovation, strategic partnerships, joint ventures. They were affiliated in building an impact app, which was for the COVID-19 stuff, and they did that with a team of 30 people in like the space of 12 days. So it's got some amazing stories, and I think he really is a great person for you to connect with, and I think your audience will get a huge amount of value, as I have, having worked with him for the last few years.
All right, well, we'll get an intro from you to Johan and reach out to him and get him on as well. Sounds like that might be a fascinating conversation, as this was.
Thank you very much, Jürgen. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Fabien, for sharing your time and insights with us so generously. And let's keep in touch.
Definitely, Jürgen. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye.
See ya.
I hope you enjoyed that insightful and informative conversation with Fabien and took something away from his episode. I think Fabien's message of partnership and service is so important, and I love the action focus, getting ideas out there early and refining from there. I'd love to know what you took away from Fabien's episode. Leave a comment below the blog post, which you can find at innovabuzz.co/Fabien Pataud. That is FABIEN all lowercase, all one word, innovabiz.co/Fabien Pataud. You'll also find contact information for getting in touch with Fabien there, as well as links to the Pataud Consulting website, his social media pages, and the other resources we spoke about in today's conversation. Fabien suggested we have a conversation with tech investor and founder of Business Authorities, Johan Nogueira, on a future InnovaBuzz podcast. So, Johan, keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Fabien Pataud. Finally, I'd like to give a shout out to Stephen from the USA for his review of the InnovaBuzz podcast. He says, "Great podcast with interesting guests. I just listened to the Glenn Twiddle episode and the value bombs of building the relationship before selling and then use of NLP. Great job." Thank you, Stephen. I'm really glad we're adding value to your listening time. Keep tuning in. There's more to come. Tune in again to the next episodes of the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we've got some more fantastic guests lined up, including the improv virtuoso and speaker Peter Margaritis and Sarah McIntyre of Bright Inbound Marketing. Thanks for listening to this episode. Make sure you subscribe to the show to be reminded of new episodes. It's free to subscribe. Leave a review if you like. Even if you don't like me, I'm okay with that. I'm asking you to leave a review because it helps other people find this show. Go to innovabiz.co to join our marketing transformation community and access a free gift my team and I made for you. It's the Marketing Master Mini Class. We want to give you everything you need to transform your marketing into a human-centered, relationship-focused growth engine. Until next time, I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBizz. Remember, be awesome and keep innovating.